Hello, and thank you for joining us where we take a look at a SRD that requires a bit of balance. Hello, everybody, and thank you all for joining us again here today for another episode of SRD Talk. In this series, we take a look at tabletop role-playing games, system reference documents, and other systems and generic role-playing games that you could potentially use as a basis for creating your own games or to borrow mechanics from, again, to create your own games and systems and learn a bit more about sort of like this hobby that we share together. Today, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at this system right here called BInAS, which stands for Balanced Integrated Attributes System. This is an sort of SRD slash recommended mechanics document that was kind of put together by Valery North, who originally created this system for one of their own games called Pivotal Destinies. Well, before I actually go into actually discussing the system itself, I did want to go ahead and cover the basics of the fact that this is a Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International Licensed game or system. So obviously that means that you can use it, assuming you under that Creative Commons Attribution license for your own games. And also this system comes with a logo that you actually saw over here on the cover. Of the PDF that you'll see there. Links to this system reference document can be found in the doobly-doo down below as usual. And of course, it has the logo, as I mentioned, this PDF, and then also a plain text document that is just like 4 pages front and back. So the core sort of mechanics for both characters and also the sort of dice resolution system for this sort of BInAS system are primarily based around D12s. So this is a D12 based game, which always gets points in my book because I feel that D12s in many ways are an underutilized die. Another thing that gives really strikes me as one of the primary themes of this system, and also is not unique, but relatively uncommon in a lot of role-playing games that have a bit more structure to them, is basically a concept of balance. So basically in the sort of BInAS system, you have your character's attributes or various elements like that your approaches, whatever version you want to use for your game, has a balance between pairs. This is going to be very familiar for those of you who have played one of many different Lasers and Feelings spinoffs, whether it's Honey Heist or whatever. In that case, of course, you only have 2 attributes, and it's a balance between the 2 of them. But also, this is a concept that was utilized to pretty good effect in the Pendragon series of games. Those series of games, you have your character has virtues and vices that balance each other, and you scale more towards one or the other. So basically, what there is you have 2 attributes, but you only have 1 score. And the somewhere in the middle here in this particular system, again, because we're dealing with D12s, they generally recommend here in the ability checks section somewhere between 3 and 10. Because it is between 3 and 10, basically the attribute on one end, you would be wanting to roll over in order to get to it, and the attribute on the other end, you're going to want to roll under to get it. So if we have just an example of a pair, a dichotomous pair, loud and quiet, where loud is like, big bombastic actions involving like strength and attracting attention and stuff like that, while quiet is more like stealthy sort of stuff. Well, there really isn't a middle because it's an even number, but if we say we put it at 6, right, that's close to middle, then we'd have, you would want to roll below a 6 for loud over here, and you'd want to roll above a 6 for quiet over here, right? And if you rolled in the middle, basically, this is the way this system works: is if you roll in the middle, then you can roll a second time, and then if you succeed a second time, that counts. Basically, it's like a critical critical success check. When you're the way it used to work, let's say in like a 3rd edition D&D, where you hit that number and then you roll a second time and you succeed again, then you get a critical success, and if you miss, then you still get that success. However, there are modifiers that do exist in the game. So basically, it's encouraged that that there could be items or spells or equipment or maybe long-term modifiers that your character could add to a role or group of roles that allow them to make it more likely that they'll hit a certain attribute without harming the ability to get the other attribute. So again, if we're going going back to that sort of quiet and loud, if my character has equipment that makes them more stealthy, then they're going to get a bonus to the quiet rolls, but that won't necessarily harm their loud rolls. I mean, you could potentially have a piece of equipment that does provide a penalty to the other side, but maybe an unequal penalty where basically like if I'm boosting the chances of getting one thing by 2, then it only harms the other one by 1 or something like that. Maybe the modifiers are maybe your characters are pilots because this is some sort of like dogfighting game or something, or a mecha game, a mecha piloting game, and the items are basically like equipment on your ship. Or stuff like that. And again, of course, your character can, of course, shift the numbers back and forth. This could be part of your basically your character advancement, is you get the option to potentially shift them back and forth, partly to basically allow to show for character growth, especially if your character is potentially going from a hard skew towards the middle, or maybe going from the middle to a hard skew, depending upon exactly like what type of growth we're talking about. Another thing about this system that sort of tries to encourage that balance is that Valery also recommends that you introduce some sort of system where the character may potentially have some consequences if they end up hitting a point where no matter what, they're going to end up rolling below a 1 or rolling below a 12 just because of modifiers or the extreme shifts in the sort of center point. And that means that like the world's gone out of balance, or your character's gone out of balance, or something unusual's gone awry, and therefore that's the end of the character, and you could start a new one. That might be a good thing to introduce, especially if, for example, consistently rolling really high or really low actually shifts your point even further in that direction, which would encourage your player to in the process of adding modifiers to their character or adding equipment to their character, they don't go too extreme one way or the other when it comes to rolling for successes. Of course, one way to potentially add some variety to this particular type of a system would be to potentially adjust the size of the die or the scale. So one example might be if you want to use a deck of playing cards, and where you, of course, can assign the values from ace to king, because, of course, you've got 1 through 10, and then jacks 11, queens 10s, kings 11, kings 12s, or basically the equivalent of a D14 if you were using just the minor arcana the minor arcana from like a tarot deck, because you have the pages in there too. So that would be able to give you a scale of, like, let's say 13 or 14 that you can't necessarily get with dice, and would also allow you to play around with different ranges without having to jump all the way to the 20. That's another reason why I kind of like this, is that it gives you enough numbers where it's not like a D10, which might be a little bit too small, to really give good variety for dice rolls, but you still got that scale in between things. That's why I think 12 for this particular type of system would be a pretty good one. It's a pretty good number to go with, so that it's not so small. The 10 is a little bit too small. The 20 is definitely too big. I feel for this, and really, unless you're adding extra levels of success granularity in there. Where the further you roll away from the middle, maybe you're still successful, but maybe less successful. It might be something. That actually would be an interesting way to potentially do it. So yeah, as I mentioned, this is a pretty simple thing, and essentially, and that's why in the beginning I actually kind of referred to this more of just like a game mechanic suggestion guide, as opposed to really more like an actual system reference document, because this is a relatively bare bones document. Again, this particular PDF, including the title page, is only 6 pages, and again, it just kind of gives you some basic suggestions. So, for example, here there's some examples of some concepts that you could potentially utilize. So yeah, I can definitely think of several different systems or types of games that would be really interesting to potentially try out with BInAS. And again, like I mentioned at the start, D12s I feel are generally neglected when it comes to dice systems. Well, I mean, it's less so recently, especially with like, you know, a lot of like 2D12 systems that have been coming out lately. But this definitely would be interesting. I think also another way that a system like this could be quite interesting would be if you also potentially used this sort of ranging between 2 attributes, but using different dice systems. Maybe one's using multiple dice. And I don't mean like a D100. I mean like maybe like 3D6, where it could be interesting to see how well a system like this might work with a dice system that actually, you know, has that bell curve instead of relying on the swinginess of a single die. Yeah, it would be interesting, especially if, for example, let's say we did have a 3D6 system, and maybe the modifiers for a particular thing, maybe your character gets a permanent modifier where instead of rolling 3D6, instead you're rolling, I don't know, 2D6 and a D4, or if you want to if we need to go to the other way, maybe they're rolling a D6 and 2 D8s. You're just trying to think of some interesting ways to potentially play around with that, and seeing how that goes. But yeah, this was BInAS, the Balanced Integrated Attribute System. Again, this was by Valery North. And yeah, links can be found down below for the, links can be found down below to where you can find it on itch. And again, just as a reminder, this is Creative Commons. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more interesting videos about system reference documents, other things related to TTRPGs, or what I'm generally up to creatively. And don't forget to rate your itch purchases. Have a good zone.